Kathy DeMarco Van Cleve is the co-author of Never Caught, the story of Ona Judge, the Young Readers Edition. She is also the author of Drizzle, The Difference Between You and Me, and Cranberry Queen. She is also a senior lecturer at the University of Pennsylvania in the Cinema and Media Studies and Creative Writing departments.
Hi, Heidi.
Hi, Kathy. Thanks for sitting here with me.
Oh, it's such a hardship to come and sit amidst, the snow, the new snow in Aspen. It's paradise. I said that to you in the email. This is our first trip, and I don't think it'll be our last. So
today is a particularly magical day with, inches and inches of fresh powder piling up outside the doors and the windows, and the blue sky and the sun. It literally is sparkling outside.
Sparkling. We were on the ski lift today, and when you look down through your goggles, it looked like glitter. It looked like clear glitter.
Yeah, you can see it straight out the window. So.
It's just diamonds everywhere. It's an extraordinarily beautiful place, and we were so lucky to be here, and I'm so lucky to be in your house. Okay, that's it.
Thank you. So just a second ago, we were talking about poetry and
Yes.
Mary Oliver.
Yes.
And I wanted to just ask you were sharing about a decision that you made to select some passages from different texts that you like. And,
Yes.
and you referenced Mary Oliver in a specific one. And Mary Oliver is currently my favorite poet. And I'd love to.
We did not plan this. But
I know, but that's synergistic, right?
Right.
So I'd love to ask you about Mary Oliver and the quote and what you love about it.
I'm going to mess up the quote, but I know it is about the idea that we cannot expect angels in our life if we don't even see them on our shoulder, something like that. To me, that means that you have to keep your mind open to everything that is magical around us, even in the most prosaic, mundane realities of our world. And I think all of her work is that. I've always been drawn to writing about nature personally. I feel that nature is, not to get religious, but I feel that it is a church. It is a sacred, writ large. I don't think it's even fair to contain the idea of nature with the word is, because it's so vast. In any case, Mary Oliver, and I haven't read everything by any means, her ability to look at something in nature, whether it's animals, whether it's a pond, whether it's reeds by a lake, whether I think she's always lived in Cape Cod up until her death, and she clearly spends so much time outside amongst trees and leaves and in all the seasons, and she's able to articulate that sense that I've had anyway, I don't know if everyone has it, of just magic and how it's helpful to us. I don't even want to say it's a need, but it's, as humans, to be able to see that and to appreciate it really in a way that's other, I think, is everything. And she is magnificent in that, and the way she pulls in her texts, again, and just what I've read, this magic and this very I'm going to say ordinary. I don't know if that's right, but ordinary. What we go through, all of us as humans in our lives, ups, downs, heartbreaks, grief, illnesses. And then you read that and you just feel like you're not alone. You feel like you're walking with her. That's how I feel. I don't know. Is that how you feel?
It's exactly how I feel. And I'm just reflecting as you were sharing that on, as you know, my son graduated from boarding school from Choate in May. And the valedictorian or the salutatorian in her speech used a Mary Oliver quote. And she specifically talked about this idea of community, and despite the lowest lows and the worst hardships and heartbreak or illness or death or any moments of being isolated, that, when you look to nature and you see the geese flying or you hear the leaves rustling, you know that that there's some kind of greater community in which we can be embraced, and that you are never alone.
Right. And take solace from and be fed from. I know that the wild geese one too. I was, after my mom died, I was bereft, and a friend sent me a Mary Oliver poem that's above my desk that I look at all the time. It wasn't one of her more lyrical poems, but it was, if that is the word to describe her. But there was it was great. It encompassed kind of the gritty and awfulness of loss, and then also this idea that I'm obviously not, that there's a community. That's the best way, like what you said.
Yeah, as you were speaking, I thought of the notion of glory, and the sort of glory of life. Does that word hold anything for you?
Oh, if my sons listen to this, they will make fun of me, and I don't care, because, when I teach, I tell my students that there are 99 creative writing professors who will say it's too hard, it's really, really hard, and I don't know, make sure that you have your trust fund, or you have your 17 jobs that you have to have, or et cetera, et cetera. And I say, I don't care. I'm very happy to be the one professor in your life that says, go for it. Absolutely, go for it. Don't even think about it. To me, when you said glory just then, I know I overwhelm myself sometimes with my exuberance of life.
I love that about you. But I really do.
And I know it can be a lot. That said, gosh, glory, life is hard. I say this sometimes. I say this to my students. My mother had Alzheimer's. I had cancer and a pretty serious surgery. I take medicine all the time for it. There's been real stuff in my life, real things, and certainly get knocked down from that, no question. But glory in life, every day we can. I mean, it seems a little silly to say this in Aspen, because it's like everybody. I've noticed the architecture here. Everyone has these massive windows, which makes sense because you can't. No matter how wonderful the art is, I don't think it's like the mountains and the terrain. That's a glory. Again, it's funny. I don't see myself as a really religious person, but God's glory. There's another poem. I can't believe I'm talking about poems. Gerald Manley Hopkins, God's grandeur, and it's about the same idea. This glory that is everywhere, which is not the same as that we all feel bad and things. And it has nothing to do, I talk to students, obviously all the time, college students, and some are from, very affluent families, some are first generation kids. The common thread for those who I feel like really are achieving, at least in creative expression, this is my own opinion, is those that can understand that as bad as things have been for them, and it can be personal in a way that's not related to socioeconomic status or anything, that when they can appreciate that there's this larger, bigger glory that awaits, that is, and not, I don't mean that in any traditional religious way, but the glory that is from going on a run outside, from going to a museum, from reading, reading something that transports you, that's glory everywhere. And, for those of us, you as well, are lucky enough to really revel in being a parent, the glory of having children and having that relationship, and it's indescribable and it is glorious. So
I was thinking about your first novel, Cranberry Queen, right?
Heidi's so nice.
And the descriptions of nature in that. And you don't say exactly where that is, right? It's
it's in a tract of land called the Pine Barrens in New Jersey, but there's no specific addresses or anything.
Okay. And so it was not an area that I had been to or knew about, but the way that you described it made me want to go there. And I look for it now sometimes when I'm landing in New York or taking off, and I have in my mind kind of what it might be like through your descriptions. So talk a little bit about how you write about nature and place, and I guess also why that's important to you.
Well, thank you, first of all. That's so kind of you. I'm sure any writer who would hear that someone wants to go visit a place they didn't know about because of something you've written, that just feels wonderful. So with Cranberry Queen, another funny story, my editor was this wonderful man, a British man, and when he read Cranberry Queen in manuscript form, he thought I had invented it. He truly was like, is this Alice in Wonderland? I said, no, you live in New York City, and it's about 100 miles south of where you are. And it's funny, I know Heidi from college in Philadelphia, and our farm was about 40 miles southeast of Philadelphia. So it's so close, and people don't know about it. I remember, it's interesting. Another thing I'm remembering because I am now parenting teenagers. When I grew up working on my family's blueberry farm. My family also owned this cranberry farm. And so and my mother was someone who, as the eighth of 10 children in an Italian family in 1930, she worked on farms as a manual laborer for much of her childhood. And even though she married into a family that owned some of these farms, she made her children go and work at a farm we picked blueberries starting at 4 years old. That has been something I think about a lot because of how much, as an adult, I've always gone back to writing about being outdoors. Certainly in Cranberry Queen, being at that's set mostly, it starts in New York City and then it ends up in the Pine Barrens during a cranberry harvest, which truly is just, I feel like nature's spectacle of just bounty. In a way, the easiest, quickest way to describe it are the Ocean Spray commercials. But it does look like that without the cute kids tramping around, in water. It is, so I was able to see always as a child, that's what, because I was forced to work outside in fields from when picking blueberries from 5 until 12, packing blueberries, which means putting the cellophane sheets on top of the pints from 12 to 18. That was always in the summers, so that would coincide with our, the school breaks. But then in the fall was the cranberry harvest. And we were in school, so we couldn't work there, although I promise if my mother could have figured that out, she would have. And to see that is really just to see, here's something maybe your listeners know or don't know. Cranberries grow no matter what. They're indigenous to America. And so if you're ever in Cape Cod, Michigan, Wisconsin, the Pine Barrens, sometimes you'll just be walking, and if you're on maybe a nature walk and you look at your feet, and this is, if they're not cultivated, there will be cranberries growing at your feet. They grew, so it is just so beautiful the way farmers have figured out how to use water as a way to harvest them. So you have this abundance of colors, right? You have where I grew up in the Pine Barrens, the cedar green of the water, the blue sky of October, the foliage in the background of the pine, of all the trees, and then these red cranberries. It's just, I can talk about it forever, and I do. I will also say the other thing about that is when I was working at the farm during my teenage years, all the kids who lived right where our farm was, which is, I don't know, population 200 or something, we didn't live there. We would drive 28 miles to the farm every day. The people I worked with had dirt bikes, which are kind of like, I don't know, stripped down motorcycles. And every morning, my mother would say, whatever you do not get on a dirt bike. And every single day I would get on a dirt bike and go through these fields and these bogs and these tracts of land. And I had no idea, certainly had never ever considered how much I would remember that forever. That is a vivid memory that I always go back to. And this feeling of speed underneath this blue sky, the Pharrell lyric, happiness is a room without a roof. It's like even better if you're in a really fast dirt bike underneath. So I think all of that is what lends. So not only actually in Cranberry Queen, in my second novel, I start and end with a visual of nature. My third novel, which is for kids, called Drizzle, it takes place at a magic farm. There's a theme here. My most recent book is a nonfiction at a young reader's version of a amazing historical story, true story of a enslaved woman of George and Martha Washington, who left Philadelphia when she was 23 and fled from them and lived freely in Portsmouth, New Hampshire for the rest of her life. Anyway, and I tried to imbue a lot of her environment in the writing of the young reader's version as well.
Okay, great. So we're going to go back and talk about each of the books and then screenplays and things like that. But the first novel, I mean, if you're looking at literature historically, is often autobiographical. So a little bit from the story, it's clear that there is some autobiography to it. How present with when you talk about that book, do you talk about any autobiographical aspects of it?
Oh gosh, well, I'm laughing. No one can see this, but I'm grinning at Heidi because I wrote that as I was heartbroken, devastated, heartbroken. Just the rug pulled out from under me, as well as the floorboards and all the successive floors underneath. I was just laid out emotionally. And I'd been working in the film business, and there's in many movies, there's a structure that in the beginning of a movie, something dramatic has to happen. So when I started to write Cranberry Queen, and the first 4 pages are about it's a woman in New York City who was 33, who was completely heartbroken because her then boyfriend had gone home from the Knicks game with someone else, and thereby ending this 3-year-long relationship. And the main character is stewing over the fact that she has to see this ex-boyfriend at a wedding with his new girlfriend. And she's just, that's all she can think about. And she also has such an awareness how pathetic this is. Certainly it was pathetic when I wrote the book 20 years ago, and it's probably considered the same way today. Like, no, I'm an empowered woman. I don't feel this way, but she does. And I realized after 4 pages that I could not write an entire book about heartbreak. So owing to my film writing training, I have the main character in the first 4 pages saying, tomorrow's going to be the worst day of my life. Tomorrow's going to be the worst day of my life. And then on page 5, I have a drunk driver kill the main character's mother, father, and brother, her only brother, in a car accident. And yes, it is meant to be grim. And it was also, I think, for me as a writer to say, Kathy, wake up. This is not the worst day of your life. This would be your worst day of your life. And then there's a book to write, because then you have a woman who is, the character stays in New York for a while, and then everyone is being all her friends and family and colleagues are trying to help her out. And she's puzzled by the idea that, wow, do they really think I'm okay because I'm going to my job? Like, she had this take, the character, and I used to think that obviously is too, that humans, we can keep up this semblance of being productive. And then everybody's so busy. So everyone's like, that, you're good. You're all good. And, but she's not all good. The character is really not good. And she quits her job and she doesn't tell anyone. And she doesn't, she basically is not being honest with anybody. And then when her family stages an intervention, she says she'll do everything they say. And as soon as they leave, she gets in her car, tosses her phone, and drives out of New York. And I was also playing with the idea that there's so many people in New York City who have no idea about the Pine Barrens. So this character is completely grief-stricken, knows that she's out of her mind, and she's driving and she's just taking all these roads and she's not really clear where, she has no idea where she is. And then suddenly she looks up and she says, oh my gosh, I must have driven to Kansas because this is a world, this can't be New Jersey because New Jersey is toxic waste dumps and turnpikes and can't be, like, and my other little funny part was this character grew up in Princeton, New Jersey, which is 45 minutes from the Pine Barrens. And because I met so many people from Princeton who had never, they were like, oh, right, I've heard the Pine Barrens, never saw it. So all of that, so it was certainly autobiographical. My family was alive and well at the time. My brother used to come to readings and just raise his hand and ask why I killed the whole family on page 4. So I will say often it is emotionally true. It is emotionally autobiographical, but certainly everybody was alive and that was not my experience. And the breakup was, but one of my friends said Kathy had to write this novel to make her life of the last 3 years make sense to the rest of us.
I just today was referencing the death of my college boyfriend, who you know, and how one of the ways that I processed it was by curating an exhibition, which was called Belief and Doubt. And because, in his choice to take his own life, I really had a kind of crisis of faith. So I've always looked to art as a way of being kept company, a way of sorting through emotions. And I understand that you would write a novel to have that same kind of ability to process, but also maybe have, solace and comfort as well.
It's everything. It seems to me, at least for those of us who are inclined to express our emotions creatively, absolutely. That's, we have a mutual friend who also just died, and it's just wretched. Everything about it, just terrible. And it's funny again, like I thought to myself yesterday when I was here in Paradise, like, you better get to work. Your friend doesn't have that option anymore. You do, get to work. Like, and I tried to have, I don't know, her death kind of propel me to action,
So you brought up the fact that you are a cancer survivor, which I wasn't really thinking about, actually. You're, talking about the death of, our friend Jenny Stein,
yes.
And who died of cancer this week. And when someone who's so young and vibrant and gorgeous and, charming and perfect, dies, there are these different ways of processing. And I have other friends. The first episode of this podcast, Lance Armstrong was on, and he talked about the challenges of his life and how what he's endured in the past few years does not compare to, the time in his life when he's thought, well, am I living or am I dying? What do you feel a sense of urgency about?
Oh, well, that's an easy answer. I have to write more. I've had 10 years of not. I didn't write. Drizzle came out in 2010. That's the kids' book. That was really that was not a great experience to write, largely because we just moved and my boys were, 2 and even younger, 1 and 3, I think. And my father was dying and my mom was sick, and that was very hard to write. That said, it was a great experience as a publication, and You're making me think I just got a letter from a woman an 8-year-old girl. I have it over my desk and I'm trying to remember where she's from. I want to say Indiana. And she sent me a picture of herself reading the book, or her mom took it, but of her reading the book, walking, and behind her is a red, a barn painted red. That's just her last name is Park. I can't remember her first name. Anyway, thank you if you ever hear this podcast. But your question is tell me again the specific question.
The question is really about, hopefully everyone is aware every day that, there's a sense of urgency to life, right? Because we just don't know what's going to happen.
Yes.
But somehow I'm making an assumption based on,
100%.
losing Jenny and your bout with cancer that, maybe you feel urgency in a way that's even more pronounced. And I'm curious how
there's
it
a
feels.
time limit now. Talk about living in the clouds. I always live in the clouds, and going along with that because I was an athlete. I like to be physical, so I think I had this sense, and I am a child at heart in many ways, not always helpful ways. I think I had this sense that, well, I'll get to my writing then. Now I'm teaching and I've got the kids and I have this new job and et cetera. And then everything comes to a screeching halt when you get a diagnosis like that, and of cancer, or I'm sure so many things. And that is when you get to the other side, if you're lucky enough to get to the other side, your numbers, we're not, it's a fact. We will all die somehow. And if I will consider it, I don't have a lot of regrets, but if I do not apply myself and figure out a way to make that happen now, as in this phase of my life, that will, for me, that will be a massive mistake, for sure. It is. So I have to, even on this trip, and it's not, I haven't been writing as consistently as I need to. That's it. So the book I talked about before, Never Caught, which is, everybody should run out and buy the adult version. It's written by this rock star historian, Erica Armstrong Dunbar. She is the slayer of everything. She also, and I'm saying slayer because she has a new book out about Harriet Tubman. And she came to slay. That's what it is. She's amazing. Anyway, she's one of my closest friends as well. And she was around the whole time when I was sick. And when Simon & Schuster, her book had done so well and received so much attention, and this was before it was a finalist for the National Book Award in 2017. Anyway, Simon & Schuster wanted to do the children's edition or a children's version. And because I had written Drizzle, Erica said, well, Kathy, you should do this. And because she also knew that writing was something I was always going back to. And I love my life in Philadelphia. I feel, it's a wonderful way to live, and something's missing if I don't write. And it was really important. So I was hired to write this adaptation, and I was really pleased that came out in January, a year ago exactly. But now it's time. If my agent's listening, she's saying to herself, "Yes, it's overtime, Kathy." But writing, there's a timer on it now, in a way that did not. Because cancer crystallizes a lot for everybody. I think if you get that, if you're told you have cancer.
So you started out writing for adults, then you did this young adult book, right. and I love Drizzle, and I love the magical realism of it, and I love the setting on the farm, and it's interesting because I went back and looked at some of your books in advance of talking with you today, and I forgot that one of the key premises of Drizzle is that they live on a farm, and every Monday at 1:00, right? It rains. Okay. And then it stops raining, and that becomes like the, cultural and psychological, emotional crisis,
right.
For that drives the narrative. But I don't know if you know, but I had written this children's book in association with this artist, Amy Adler, who I had done a show with at the Aspen Art Museum. And we were going to do a catalog for her. And she said, instead of a catalog, she wanted a children's book. And she asked me if I would write it. And I said, well, no, like I'm an art historian. Like I don't know how to write a children's book. And she said, well, will you think about it? And at the time my kids were pretty, little. And I was reading, 100 children's books a week,
nonstop,
the same ones over and over and new ones and whatnot. And so I said, okay, well, I'll hang your images in my office. And if I can come up with a story, then I'll write the book. And if I can't, then, sorry.
Right.
But anyway, the premise in that is that every day at a certain hour, the protagonist of this book, her room changes a different color. And
Heidi, I need to get this book. What? That's so great.
Well, so I actually want to look at the years, but anyway, it's so, because I was like, how did we have, but I mean, there's no single thought, right? Like that's the collective consciousness. So,
right.
So in this book, on Monday her room turns red, and Tuesday it's orange, and Wednesday it's yellow, and Thursday it's green. Anyway, it's the colors of the rainbow. And then of course Sunday is the most magical day of all, because then her room turns into the rainbow hour. And
is that what the book's called?
The book's called The Rainbow Hour. Yeah. But how did you come up with Drizzle? Because there's a commonality in these two books, right?
Yes.
About female protagonist, young girl,
Yep.
The power of imagination, the associative relationship with color, and what that means and how it feels. And
yes, for Polly Peabody's, and that book, I remember, and I don't have this anymore. I'm grateful for this. I mean, I still have it, but now I'm okay with it. So when I was writing Drizzle, it's kind of an insane premise, right? Every Monday at 1:00 it rains, and it's a rhubarb farm, but it's a magic rhubarb farm. So the rhubarb, in one of the varieties of rhubarb, tastes like chocolate. And others are cultivated so that it could stop a hole in the ozone layer. And there's a lake in the middle where no one can drown. And the only reason I put that in there is because my kids were learning to swim. And I was, every parent knows the fear that your child has to know how to swim. Mm-hmm. And so I made this, the center part of this farm is the enchanted lake where nothing drowns, not humans, not any kind of animal, nothing can die in this lake. I wish I could remember the why I said every Monday it rains at 1:00. I always knew how the book would end. I always knew it was about this girl learning she had to trust herself. Here's something else Heidi and I share. We have sons named Emerson.
Correct.
That's I've never met anyone else who has a son named Emerson, actually. And so this is not, I didn't name him because of Ralph Waldo Emerson, but I have since tried to read up on Ralph Waldo Emerson since his birth. And so there's a whole, thread through the story about trusting thyself, which is obviously one of the famous Emerson quotes. And I wanted Polly as a female to understand this, and that she, even as this mousy 12-year-old, 11-year-old girl who's, knows she's kind of strange, thinks she's kind of strange, maybe because her best friend is a rhubarb plant. I don't know if I've mentioned that the rhubarb plants communicate. Some of them, I can promise you, I don't know if I ever said this to you, Heidi, that when I was writing it, I'd never written a kid's book before. I had sold it on a proposal. So I would hear my boys, 2 and 4 downstairs having a great time. And I would be up in my office, jealous, because I couldn't be with them playing, which was way more fun than thinking about this book that I couldn't even describe because it sounds so insane. Like there's slug sand, there's magic. I mean, it's just insane. But I am interested in science. I'm really interested in genetics. I am really interested in the climate. I am really interested in earth sciences, specifically the water cycle. this new project I'm working on and have been working on forever that you also know about has a climate change background to it. I don't know it. I'm not in any way, it's not a discipline of mine, but I'm really interested in it. And that is, again, part of what fed this story for Drizzle. And I don't want to give away this story, but Polly Peabody she inherits I am giving away the story. All right, that's okay. It's a kid's book. So anyway, she inherits this, the females in the story, if they are born with a crooked finger, again, autobiographical, I have a very crooked finger. I'm showing it to Heidi, but it literally makes a right turn at the uppermost knuckle. But if you are a female born in this family, you have the ability to make it rain. But because she's only 12, she can only make it drizzle. But once the rain stops in her farm, she has to confront her beloved aunt, her aunt who gave her Ralph Waldo Emerson books, who introduced her to literature and art and culture all around the world. She finds out that her aunt, who she adores, absolutely idolizes, actually wants to sell her family farm. That is so devastating to her, and that's even more devastating when Polly, the main character, discovers that her aunt could be making it rain and is choosing not to. I wish I have ideas. My family no longer owns our cranberry farm because there was a big family squabble. It was a family business. And now the third largest supplier to Ocean Spray is a tract of land that people can canoe and picnic in, which is good. But there was nothing wrong with the farm except that the owners couldn't get along. And so I kind of put that in this kids book. I didn't write it, frankly, because I wanted to get into the kids market, although it was a complete delight. I wrote it because when I think of our family farm, I'm a kid, because that's when I was there the most. So that was, and of course, gosh, a farm again. I mean, I say it all the time, but there's so much to write about in terms of visual impact. There's so much. Like in your book, to use the colors of the rainbow for what's your main character's name? Was it?
So bad. I can't. I mean, I know what she looks like, but I can't actually remember what her name is. Right,
well, anyway, yeah.
So maybe Annabelle. I don't know. She's loosely based on my daughter, and also based on the girl that Amy Adler had drawn, who just happened to look like my daughter also. So
it is. I mean, again, this is. I think probably I don't know the answer in visual art, but for writing, for sure, you have. I don't know. Even writers who say they don't write about themselves, and that might be true. I know. Obviously, I was not an enslaved woman in 1798, but I could. I felt that I could imagine what it would be like to not be able to read or write, but be so adamant that I could no longer spend 1 second with this family, that I would figure out how to get away from them. That I'm not saying I would have done that, but I could feel what it would be like to make that kind of decision.
So when you're writing, and that's a really interesting description, right? So in fiction writing, I think has to convey a sense of authenticity, right? Like the reader has to believe the writer. So what strategies do you use to be in the space to create something which is authentic?
That's such a good question. I'm going to answer it more as a professor of writing than a practitioner of writing, because I still haven't nailed it with this book that I've been trying to figure out for years. Because it comes down to, I mean, we can talk about, we can come up with a movie or, a play or a novel or a short story, but it has to be this human emotion, right? So I did kind of cheat with my first novel, but I would just like to say many first writers do. But certainly if you kill a main character's entire family by this external event that was no they didn't do anything to cause the death. Hopefully you're going to engender some sympathy for the main character. And in the same way that I just described Ona Judge at the age of 23, people, I think, many people anyway, can envision what it would be like if one day they woke up and they got a phone call that their entire close family has been killed in a car crash. That people understand that. I always talk in my screenwriting classes about Pixar, and every screenwriting teacher should talk about Pixar because they're master storytellers. But there's a reason, the mom dies. I teach Finding Nemo all the time. We don't have to talk about Pixar movies, but the idea is to be authentic means to I think, elicit emotions in the reader that makes them want to turn the page. And the only thing that will make people turn the page is if they can suddenly, somehow, in this kind of alchemy that happens, that they can see the world that you've written in the way that you want them to see it, and then also embroidering it with their own life experiences. So while that girl I was talking about in Indiana who read Drizzle, I don't know anything about her. I would imagine there are many things we don't have in common. Obviously, she could latch on to something. And I think it's a story of this girl who's trying to figure out how she fits in this world. And then most importantly, how to save her home. That's a pretty basic, and her home happens to be the farm, which for me was a big deal, obviously. So I just think for writing, how to be authentic is to start with some truthful crucible in your life. When I talk about Drizzle, it's basically siblings who could not get along, which is what happened in my family, and as a result, there's no farm anymore. So I wanted to, again, going back to my optimistic personality, right? So I want them, in my real life, we have no farm anymore. In the book, I was able to save the farm. But I hope, the goal, is to make people identify with Polly, even if you're like a young boy, even if you're a teenage boy, even if you're, a mom who's reading books to her kid, they have to be invested too. So yes, Polly's best friend is a rhubarb plant, but I received a ton of letters from kids who they were so invested in that relationship. And I can pretty much guarantee nobody on this earth has actually been friends with a talking, communicative rhubarb plant.
We started talking about glory. Now you just talked about friendship. What do you think are some of these essential values?
To engender like a creative or any kind of
just that you
engagement, kind of an emotional engagement with something?
I guess I'm asking more about like your personal values. What matters most to you?
Oh, that's my sons. That's my sons and my family, my husband, but my sons. It's the joy of my life to have children. And it's in an inexplicable. Why can I not say that word? Inexplicable way, because motherhood, especially today, it seems like it brings all these kind of, are you going to give up who you are? And Kathy, maybe you should have been writing all that time, the last 10 years. And I don't know. I have derived such just a personal glory and joy and delight in the relationship, in parenting and raising my sons, and as a daughter to my parents, and I hope as a friend and as a sibling and as a wife. And I think here's a value I have. I feel pretty strongly about this. Like it's been of increasing importance to me. I think we're put on this earth not to cause suffering to other people. I can't say that strongly enough. I really, really believe that this idea of, and I'm going to juxtapose it next to selfishness. There is no reason. Bad things happen to people every single day. Horrible, horrible things. Car crashes, diagnoses, breakups, heartbreak, whatever. And then to add, but so when humans are unkind, and it's not like I'm a martyr and I'm not perfect in any of that stuff, but a willingness to not understand that everybody it is so easy to be kind. It is so easy to be kind. It's more fun to be mean. It's definitely cooler, no question. And it's kind of fun being aging has its whole, baggage with it. But one of the great things is I can be that straight up nerd and say, no, I get it. Like, it's cool to live on the edge and, be selfish and be the unlikable main character. That happens all the time, because especially women, we don't have to be likable. You don't. Absolutely. Be true to yourself. But you should be kind to other people. It's not hard to do. And I feel really, can you tell? I feel super strongly about it. I'm actually interested. I've never said that out loud. It's been in my head for so long. So what do you think about that?
As you were talking about that, I was thinking about the power of having a platform. And that as a writer of, fiction, and as a screenwriter, and also as a professor at an Ivy League school, you have this incredibly powerful platform, and you have it on a daily basis. And I think that connects maybe to my question about urgency and values, and how all those things come together in what you just shared. And I think that that's a really powerful place to have that kind of exuberance and passion, which
I really do, because I've thought about this so much. What is the personal gain anyone has? Anyone. I mean, actually, I know we can answer this. Well, maybe more money, maybe a bigger credit on the movie screen, maybe, but that's not how you look yourself. I just think being kind is not this mealy mouth, PC thing. It is just basic human. We need that. We need that kind of relationship with other people.
Do you think that is the basis of integrity?
That's a good question. My kids were taught in their Quaker school in Philadelphia, integrity is what you do when no one's watching. And I do think, I love that definition, because it's what I go back to when I hear the word integrity. And I do think that is rooted, kindness is certainly a part of that, because, I'm just thinking, I'm just thinking for a second about, there's another thing that this is again, a personal thing. And this is harder. The idea of credit and taking credit and being appropriately selfish. Again, contradicting what I just said, but there's a balance beam of life, right, where we need to be able to be confident, appropriately hope and have integrity. Do behave how behave in a humanitarian way when no one is watching. For sure. And at the same time, we need to be able to support ourselves first, right? That's been trickier for me, for sure. And I know there is an integrity in advocating for yourself. I don't know how I got to this, sorry, but anyway. But without being selfish, without, a pet peeve of mine, this is what I was going to say before about values, people who just take credit and credit and credit for things. I'm sure you have experienced this too. And it's to me, the nails on the blackboard at this point. But and I guess that's what I'm ruminating about out loud, is that I just don't know how exactly I'm going to fit that in with the idea of then the appropriate credit. There is a way to do that. I haven't mastered that. But I think kindness and integrity is those are mainstays, right? And what else do we have if we're not that?
So there's a trailer out for a film that's coming up, the new Kingsman movie, and there's a excerpt from the film, of course, because that's what a trailer is. But there's a line, and it says something like, "Reputation is what others think of you. Character is what you think of yourself."
Oh, that's perfect. That's what I was just trying to say. Thank you.
Or characters.
Marketing department of the Kingsman.
Yeah, or character is who you are, and so this is dialogue from the movie. But I've seen the trailer twice, and that was my takeaway. And I think a lot about that idea of, who we actually are and who people think we are and who we're needed to be by whom and when, and how we show up for those needs, but also our own needs.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, this is the human condition, right? Figuring this out. But it is not anybody listening to this, anybody, anywhere. And this is so funny given what I just said about credit. I'm going to totally tell you something you probably don't know. And it's going to toot my own horn and be all this stuff. But I won a teaching award this year, which was awesome. And I was really proud of it. But I've thought, I think I'm a good teacher, whatever, I'm fine. Students come to my class, so that's good, right? They don't blow it off. But what I think I really do is I'm nosy, and I make sure that I know my students. I think they would say that. And part of it's creative writing. They're going to write about authentic experiences, or try to, and all the stuff that they do. But I was like, wow, teaching, I mean, maybe pedagogically I am really, really astute. I don't think that is the case. I think it's that students respond because I talk to them as humans all the time. And I tell them what my value set is all the time, and what I want them to be thinking about when they put their fingers to the keyboard, which is, express what's in your heart, express the story you want to tell. Don't, you're in college, you don't have to write the next Marvel movie. You might have to do that when you leave college, but right now you can write whatever you want, and we can just work on trying to make that the best expression of the story that you can do. That's great. Let's start with that. But I need to know the person for me to be able to really comment effectively on it. So, see, this is what happens when I teach too. I just wander off again. Everyone listens like, oh, she got a teaching award. But I think it's that kind of human connection. Anyway, it all comes back to that, and being an empathetic person, at least in an instructor role.
So using the broadest definition of art, to include creative writing, fiction, poetry, film, writing, why do you think art matters?
My first response is going to be approaching it as a negative. Without art, I think our humanity dies. That 100 million, I'm completely convicted on that belief. With art, we have the opportunity to see ourselves as not, it's just not the solely important person, this immortal God presence. It's with art we are able to be part of a larger universe, and that's everything. And that teaches us everything. I can't. A world without art is astonishing to me. When I meet people who haven't read a book, or haven't gone to a museum, or haven't seen a movie or a play, and have no interest, that's not a life I want to live, and that's not a world I want to be in. So I'm really grateful for people like you, Heidi, and I know we've talked about this, but a number of our friends who have creative endeavors. It's a world without that is a barren landscape. That's what I think.
Thanks for talking with me today, Kathy.
Heidi, this was so fun. Thank you.
Conversations About Art is part of Heidi.art. This episode was produced by Simon Illa. Our theme music was composed by Eric McDougall. Jordan Weisberg is our curatorial associate. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and review us on whichever platform you listened, as it helps us further our goal of connecting all to art. We will be back again every other Tuesday with new episodes. Thanks for listening.